Hello, everyone. Thank you for watching. Subscribe, and let's go.
Hi, friends. Please subscribe and help me get my first 1,000 subscribers. It's one click for you, but for me, it's a huge encouragement and motivation. Thank you to everyone who has already subscribed. I hope you enjoy this story. Let's go. The most dangerous lies are the ones we tell ourselves to keep a dying flame alive. He thought he was saving his legacy, but he was actually walking straight into a meticulously planned trap. Let's break down the subtle red flags of calculated betrayal that most men miss until the floor drops out from under them. For educational purposes. Look, sit down. I've seen a lot in my 50-something years, but this story? It's a classic case of how the modern world just chews up a good thing and spits it out. The whole thing started in San Francisco. Now, Chris was your typical tech guy. Smart, hardworking, a real straight shooter. He had a solid gig at some big-name software firm in the city, pulled in a six-figure salary, and drove a clean Ford F-150. On paper, the guy was living the American dream. He had this nice condo with a view of the bay, a fridge full of craft IPs, and a wife he'd been crazy about for 10 years. Her name was Sarah. Sarah was a real firecracker. She was a high-level manager for one of those massive pharma companies. You know the type. Always in a tailored suit, heels clicking on the floor like a drumbeat, and her nose always buried in her iPhone. She was ambitious as hell. She wanted to climb that corporate ladder until there were not any rungs left. And she did it, too. But listen, that kind of success comes with a price tag. Lately, Chris was starting to feel like he was living with a ghost. Sarah was always on a plane, in a meeting, or putting out fires with clients. They'd spend their evenings eating takeout from some Thai place, barely saying a word. If they did talk, it was about her quarterly projections or some office drama. The spark? It was not just fading. It was like someone had dumped a bucket of ice water on it. Chris missed the old days, going for drives down the Pacific Coast Highway, talking about the future. Now, Sarah was just too tired or too busy. She even told him once that the fire had gone out, but he did not see the freight train coming until it was too late. Anyway, one Tuesday morning, Chris is heading to the office with his Yeti cup full of coffee. Sarah's rushing around, packing for another urgent trip to a satellite office down the coast. She gives him this quick, cold peck on the cheek, the kind of kiss you'd give your uncle at Thanksgiving. She says, "See you Friday, babe. Hope the week goes smooth." And she's already out the door, probably checking her email before she even hits the elevator. Chris felt it in his gut right then. That sinking feeling, you know? Like something had already shifted and he was just waiting for the floor to drop out. And he was right. See, Sarah had been seeing a guy named Nick during these trips. Nick was a manager in a different department. Tall, looked like he walked straight out of a GQ ad. Wore those $5,000 suits. At first, they were just co-workers. But one night, Sarah's working late at the office, and Nick sends her a text. "Still at it? I'm grabbing some Starbucks. Want to pick me up?" They ended up talking in the hallway, real quiet-like. Sarah starts unloading on him, telling him how things are cooling off at home. And Nick? He plays it perfect. He tells her, that's just how it goes after 10 years. It's hard to keep the pilot light lit. He looked at her like she was the only person in the world. Next thing you know, they're having lunch, laughing, and she's thinking about his voice when she's back in her hotel room. By the third night of the trip, things moved fast. They had dinner at the hotel restaurant, and Nick offered to walk her back to her room. Being a gentleman, he said with a smirk. When she swiped her key card, her heart was thumping like a jackhammer. Part of her was screaming about Chris and their 10-year marriage, but the rest of her was just gone. She smiled. He moved in, and that was that. She woke up the next morning next to him, and her head was a mess. She felt the rush, sure, but she also felt the guilt hitting her like a hangover. But here's the kicker. Instead of stopping, she started thinking of a way to legalize the whole thing. She wanted the thrill of Nick without losing the safety of Chris. When she got back to the airport and saw Chris waiting by the luggage carousel, she was shaking inside. But Chris just gave her that same tired, warm smile. He asked how the trip was, and she just fed him some lines about meetings and spreadsheets. Back at the condo, everything felt small and gray to her. She appreciated Chris. He'd supported her, helped her with the down payment on the place, been her rock. But after Nick, the routine felt like a prison sentence. She knew she could not just walk in and say, "Hey, I'm sleeping with a guy from work." So she decided to play a long game. She wanted to open the marriage up so she could keep her side piece without the lying. One night, they're lying in bed, and she drops the bomb. She says, "Chris, do not you feel like we're stuck in a rut?" He's surprised. She says, "Everyone gets into a routine after a decade." But she keeps pushing. She says, "What if we tried something new, like an open thing?" She almost choked on the words, but she got them out. She did not tell him about Nick, obviously. That would have blown the whole thing up. She just wanted him to agree to the lifestyle so she could have her cake and eat it too. Fast forward to Friday night. She waits until Chris is in a good mood because he just finished a big project. They go to this nice steakhouse on the waterfront, crashing waves, the moonlight, the whole bit. Over dessert, she brings it up again. "I was reading about these lifestyle parties," she says. "Swingers. Maybe we should just check one out to spice things up." Chris just stared at her. I mean, the guy looked like he had just been hit with a wet fish. He says, "You think we need to find other people?" She tells him it's just for fun, just a one-time thing to see if it's for them. Inside, she's terrified, but she's acting like it's no big deal. Chris is a thoughtful guy. He doesn't just fly off the handle. He takes a minute, shakes his head, and says, "It sounds crazy, Sarah, but I guess if we've been together 10 years, maybe there's something to it. I'm not saying I'm ready, but I'll think about it." Sarah felt this huge wave of relief. He did not say no. That was the opening she needed. She figured she'd just be patient and wear him down. About a week later, Sarah comes home all fired up. She'd been digging around on the internet and found this lifestyle club. It was not some seedy basement either. It was a massive, high-end house tucked away in one of those quiet, rich suburbs in Marin County. They were having a newbie night. No pressure, no obligations, just a friendly meet and greet. Sarah figured it was the perfect way to stop Chris from dragging his feet. They pulled up that Saturday night in the Ford. Chris was gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. Sarah looked cool as a cucumber, but I bet her heart was doing 90 miles an hour too. The place was beautiful. Expensive landscaping, soft lighting, the works. Inside, it was not a circus. It was just a bunch of well-dressed couples sipping cocktails. You had bankers, IT guys, doctors, even a few teachers. The hostess, this nice middle-aged lady, gave them the grand tour. No crazy stuff out in the open, just a real relaxed vibe. Chris stood there with a scotch in his hand, listening to the ice cubes clink, watching couples get a little cozy on the leather sofas. Sarah saw him looking all shell-shocked and actually felt a little bad for the guy. For a straight-edge guy like Chris, This was a total culture shock. They started out just talking to people. Like I said, everyone seemed normal. Most of them were there for the same reason, to see what they'd been missing. Chris ended up leaning against the fireplace, and he noticed this woman across the room. She was with her husband, but she kept looking at Chris with this look. You know the one. He looked away, feeling like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar. But the gears in his head were already turned. Sarah was on edge for a different reason. Nick was not there, obviously. Her lover did not have a clue she was out here, expanding her horizons. But she liked the feeling of it. She felt like she'd finally unlocked a door that let her breathe. That first night, they did not do anything crazy. They just drank some Napa wine, talked, and headed back to the city around 4 a.m. after swapping numbers with a few couples for the future. The drive home was quiet. Chris did not know whether to be excited or disgusted. Sarah looked calm, but she was buzzing. Step 1 was done. After that, Sarah would not let it go. She kept telling Chris they needed more passion. Chris said the whole scene felt weird, but he admitted he liked the way that one woman had looked at him. Sarah jumped on that. She told him, "See, we just need to find our tribe. Then it'll be an experience we'll never forget." That was the start of their Fresh Start Marathon. Sarah was always on those private forums, finding themed parties and house gathers. Every weekend, they were out somewhere new. Sometimes it was just a straight-up sex party, but usually it was more like a mixer where you'd flirt and then maybe slip away to a private room if the vibe was right. Chris started getting into it, but it was not like he was having the time of his life. Half the time, he felt like they were just trying to patch a leaky boat with duct tape. But Sarah loved the game, and he wanted to keep her happy, so he went along with it. And I gotta tell ya, a little curiosity started growing in him, too. He started wondering if there was someone out there who'd actually make him feel something again. While all this was going down, Sarah was playing a double game. She was still seeing Nick on her business trips, lying through her teeth every time she got back. When Chris asked how the office in San Jose was, she'd just give him the bare minimum. She used the swinger parties as a smokescreen. It kept Chris distracted. Even if he suspected something, he'd see her being open at the parties and figure she was not hiding anything. Then came the night at this mansion owned by a couple named Kevin and Angelina. The party was in full swing when this guy Sam sat down next to Sarah. He was an IT developer, wore these thin glasses, real smart guy. They started out talking about AI and tech stuff, but it got personal fast. Sarah realized Sam had this soft charisma, not like Nick's aggressive style. It was deeper. While she was talking to Sam, Chris was across the room with Chloe. She was this thin brunette who knew everything about music and books. They were actually having a real conversation, laughing about concerts they'd been to. For the first time in years, Chris felt comfortable. It was not about the sex. It was just easy. The hosts turned down the lights and put on some slow music. Sam asked Sarah if she wanted to go for a walk in the garden. They went out there, drank some wine under the stars, and he asked her if she wanted something more. Sarah knew that was the whole point of the night, but she felt a pull towards Sam that was different. He felt like a real person, not just a thrill. That same night, Chris finally pushed past the guilt and went to a room with Chloe. She was gentle and fun, and she made him feel like he did not have to be so stiff all the time. He felt that mix of excitement and the "this AI not right" feeling. But the curiosity won out. But here's the thing. The more they went to these parties, the further apart they got. The spark they were looking for was happening with other people, not each other. Sarah was becoming obsessed with Sam. She was texting him at work, sending him voice notes, talking about the meaning of life. He was starting to rank right up there with Nick in her head. Chris was seeing Chloe outside of the parties too. She brought this lightheartedness into his life that Sarah had squeezed out years ago. And get this, Chris realized he did not even care where Sarah was anymore. At first, he was jealous, but now, he just felt nothing. Maybe it was freedom. Maybe it was just being numb. But they were drifting apart at 100 miles an hour. One night at the condo, Sarah finally said it out loud. "Have you noticed we do not have anything to talk about anymore? It's all just about the next party." Chris did not hold back. "Do you have any other topics? You're so wrapped up in your new friends and your trips that I've forgotten the last time we just went for a walk, Sarah." It was bitter. They realized the experiment did not save the marriage. It just gave them a legal way to leave it. Sarah snapped at him, saying it was her idea to save them, and he was failing. Chris barked back that she was doing just fine for herself, running off to see Nick and Sam every chance she got. When he said Nick's name, Sarah flinched. She did not think he knew. He did not have proof, but he was not stupid. He saw the way she looked at her phone and how often she had to be in San Jose. He did not ask the big questions because he was probably afraid of the answers. As time went on, Sam started taking over Sarah's whole brain. He was not just a swinger partner. She felt a soul connection with the guy. Chris was just the guy she shared a mortgage with. And Chris? He was spending more and more time at coffee shops with Chloe, talking about movies and the future. He was not in love yet, but he felt a warmth with Chloe that Sarah had not given him in a decade. Things hit a point where the whole swinging excuse just fell apart. Sarah was staying out late, claiming she had client dinners, but we all know that's code for Nick or Sam. Meanwhile, Chris was not asking questions anymore. He was spending all his time over at Chloe's place. The bedroom at home was like a morgue. If anything happened between them, it was just going through the motions. Total formality. They both knew the deal. Right around then, Sarah started seeing the cracks in her little fantasy. Nick turned out to be a real flake. He liked the heat and the secret hotel rooms, but he was not looking to change his life for her. She'd been dreaming about him being husband number 2, but to him, she was just a road trip fling. When she realized Nick did not have a heart, she leaned harder into Sam. He seemed to feel the same, but he had his own baggage, supposedly a mess of a relationship that was ending, but who knows. Anyway, one night, Sarah decides to pull the trigger. She's got this whole script ready. She's going to tell Chris she wants a trial separation. In her head, Chris is supposed to break down, cry, and beg her to stay. She figured she'd use his fear to keep him on the hook while she explored things with Sam. If he said no, then whatever. She'd just get a divorce and Sam would catch her. Or maybe Nick. They finish dinner, and the house is dead quiet. Sarah takes a breath and says, "Chris, I've been thinking. We need a break. I love you, but things are not working. We need time apart to find ourselves." She's waiting for the waterworks, but Chris just looks at her with this calm, sad expression. He says, "Yeah, I've been thinking the same thing. This house is empty, Sarah. And honestly, I've met someone. Someone I actually feel something real for. I'm ready to move out." Sarah was floored. This was not the plan. She expected guilt, not a replacement. She tried to keep her cool and asked, "Who is she?" Chris did not even blink. "Chloe. You remember her from the parties." He sounded so sure, like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. That was the kicker. Sarah wanted a safety net, not a clean break. But Chris was done. He told her straight out, "We've been living like roommates. You're always in the city or busy with your new friends. I know you only wanted the open marriage so you could have your freedom. I'm done being the guy waiting at home." She tried to pull the "you do not understand me" card, but she could see it in his eyes. He was way ahead of her. He was ready for the divorce lawyers, because he had already found the warmth he'd been missing in his own marriage. Then the real mess started. Sarah realized she'd lost control. She called Sam, hoping he'd be her rock, but the guy got cold feet. He was not ready for a serious step, and did not want to be the guy she left her husband for. Even Nick backed off. He liked his life simple, and Sarah's life was getting complicated fast. Just like that, her whole house of cards came down. Chris was not trapped. He was gone. And the guys she thought were waiting in line, they vanished. She even tried to walk it back, asking Chris if they should wait and see. But he was solid as a rock. He'd spent years being used, and he was finally free. The divorce went through quick. No kids, which was something Chris always wanted, but Sarah kept putting off until next year. They had to split the equity in the condo since they both paid into the mortgage, but Chris just wanted out. He took a settlement and moved in with Chloe as soon as the ink was dry. Sarah stayed in the big empty condo, shivering under the blankets at night, thinking about how they used to be 10 years ago. Once the married tag was gone, Nick stopped calling altogether. "Let's not make it a drama, Sarah," he told her. Sam stopped answering her texts. The freedom she'd been dying for turned out to be a whole lot of nothing. One evening, Sarah's standing on the balcony with a glass of Cabernet, watching the sun drop behind the San Francisco skyline. The wind's blowing the curtains, and she can hear the traffic down on the Embarcadero. That's when it really hit her. Everything she tried to rig and control was gone. The marriage she thought she had in her back pocket was dead. The lovers were gone. She still had the job, sure, but she had the money to pay the rent and keep up appearances, but it felt hollow. She wanted to be pissed at Chris and Chloe, but she knew she did not have a leg to stand on. He'd been honest, and she'd been playing games. A few weeks later, they met at the lawyer's office to sign the final papers. Chris looked good, stronger, smiling. Sarah looked at him and remembered the guy she'd nearly forgotten. He was starting a new life, apparently planning a trip to Italy with Chloe. Talk about irony. She walked out of that office with a plastic folder full of divorce papers, and it felt like she'd been punched in the gut. You want fresh thrills? Fine. But do not be surprised when the foundation of your life turns to sand. Sarah stopped going to those parties. She could not stand the sight of that world anymore. Work felt like a drag. When she reached out to Nick one last time, he just said, "Keep it light, Sarah. We were just having fun. Life goes on, I guess. Maybe she'll find something real again if she learns her lesson." But at that moment, she was just a woman who'd lost everything. The husband who moved on, the lovers who did not care, and the spark that she realized you can't not just manufacture with strangers. That's the story of the couple from the Bay who went looking for new colors and ended up with a blank canvas. It's a tough lesson. Be careful when you open the door to freedom, because you might just find out that the person you really needed just walked right through it and out of your life. The fatal mistake here was not a lack of effort. It was the illusion that you can fix a broken foundation by inviting strangers into the house. When a partner suggests expanding horizons, they've often already crossed the border in their mind. My advice? First, never negotiate your core values to satisfy someone else's midlife crisis. Second, if the spark requires a third party, your marriage is not a partnership anymore. It's a performance. Protect your peace and your assets the moment the baseline of respect disappears. What would you have done if the person you trusted for a decade turned into a stranger overnight? Write your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe for more honest case studies on modern relationships.